Go to college for free. Yes, free college can happen to you. A debt-free degree can become a reality for your family. I'm going to show you in this webinar how to separate fact from fiction, information maybe that you have heard that may or may not be true. My name is Jean Burk, and I am the founder and creator of the College Prep Genius program. I have been teaching test prep all over the United States for 20 years, and as well as other countries. We've had students raise their SAT scores between 300 and 700 points, ACT 4 to 11 points, and CLT 18 to 26 points. So get ready for a lot of information that could be extremely life-changing for your family. I'm going to talk about 7 things today, so stick with me to the end because there's a lot of good information that could change the trajectory of your kid's future. Since the average student spends 20 years paying off college debt, 2 decades of their life, there is no college worth that. That is a lousy investment. So in this webinar, you're going to learn how you can get free college regardless of your income. It doesn't matter whether you're low, middle, high income, makes no difference. And why test scores are the golden ticket to free college. Why are they tied directly to scholarship money? What is the truth about college entrance tests going away? Yes, there was a time after 2020 that happened, but it's completely different now. I'm going to show you that. Why do even smart students, valedictorians, top 10% of students bomb these type of tests? Here's a spoiler alert. It's not about IQ. And why should my middle school student be taking a test prep class? Why should I put this on my radar? It seems a little early. Well, I'm going to show you why it's not only not, but it can make all the difference in the world for your student to start even as early as middle school. Well, what if my child doesn't want to go to college? Then there's really no need for a test prep program for them. Again, I will dispel that myth as well. And I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide what you should be doing in each grade. So how can you get free college regardless of your income? Well, first of all, if you are in what's known as low income, you're going to apply for what's called need-based aid. Now, what is low income? That's going to vary, but I would say a lot of colleges would consider between $40,000 to $65,000 as low income. But then you've got colleges like Stanford and Princeton that consider $140,000 low income. Harvard also has a program called grading scale tuition, and that is if you make somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000, then you only pay 10% to go to Harvard, which can be less than junior college in many cases. And there are 400 colleges that will meet 80 to 100% of need. And if your student does have high test scores and you are in that low income bracket, then your student could get free college in the top 25% of colleges. And that includes the top tier selective as well as Ivy League schools. So here's a list of the 400 colleges by starting with Alabama. And I just put a few on here, but I just started it with the letter A. And you can see how many of them started 80 to up to 100% of need. So this is a good example. So what about if you're in where most families lie, and that is in the middle income or middle to high income? Well, then you're going to be chasing merit aid. Merit aid has nothing to do with your income. That does not matter where you fall. This has to do with some type of attribute that your student has been involved in, whether it's based on their test score, music, sports, dance, art. And where you get the free college, where the free tuition up to full ride start, is finding colleges where your student's stats, meaning their SAT or ACT score or their GPA, fall into the 75th percentile or above. So where do you find that? Well, there is a site called the Common Data Set where you can find the 50 percentile of the SAT, ACT scores for all the colleges. This site has thousands and thousands of colleges and tons of information from each one. And once you find the colleges where your students' scores will be at least in the 75th or higher, then that's where you're going to start looking for that free college. And here's an example for some colleges that you'll notice on the far right over there shows the mid 50 percentile on their SATs or ACT scores. The numbers in red are the 75th percentile. So for example, Alabama State can give your student what's known as the Presidential Academic Scholarship, which is what's called a full ride plus, which means not only will they pay everything, but they'll have extra perks. Those could be anywhere from spending cash, honors dorms, study abroad stipends, grad school money, and so forth. If you look on down a little further, Howard University in Washington, D.C., a student can receive the Bison STEM Scholar, and that can get them up to a full ride. And notice it's only a 26 ACT or a 1250 SAT. Now, some of these scholarships could be automatic versus competitive. They might factor in the GPA. So it's always good to check with them. But this at least gives you an idea that your student doesn't have to have a 1600 or a 36 ACT to get an amazing scholarship and get it paid for. So why are test scores tied directly to scholarship money? First of all, colleges get their national rankings based on test scores. So the higher the test score, the more scholarship money that the student is going to get, which it makes the colleges look good, so they're willing to pay your way. 85% of colleges will admit and give money based on what's known as metrics or just on test scores alone. Because the higher test scores helps the colleges not only look better on their rankings, that allows them to attract more students, and especially students who are willing to pay full price. They can also attract very talented athletes who only need the minimum to get in because they have a lot of high-scoring students or they're looking for more. They're willing to roll out that red carpet and give you amazing perks because you make them look good. Colleges know that a 4.0 at one high school is not the same at another. Every school weighs and calculates their scores differently. Some schools might be hard and rigorous, some might be easy, have easy teachers. And so students who have the same GPA look the same on paper. And for homeschoolers, it gives them that credibility, that validity to their transcript so that the colleges don't know those grades were made up. But if you've got identical GPA students, then you need something that levels the playing field. And a test score, a standardized test score, is the only numerical component that's common to all applicants. And colleges keep recorded data from years and years back. So they could look at a student with, let's say, a 1500 or a 1300 or 1280 SAT, and then they could go back 5, 10, 15 years and look at those same students with same test scores of students that are similar, and to make sure where did they fall. Did they end up graduating? Did they graduate with honors? Colleges play the long game. And that's the thing about it is they're very much like the military. The military is not looking for cadets. They are looking for officers. And colleges are not looking for applicants. They're looking for supporting alumni. So when a student can come in with a high test score and they can show that they're the 1/3 that graduate, because usually about 30% will drop out after the freshman year and 50% after the sophomore year, and only about 1/3 will graduate. And so these admissions officers don't have a crystal ball, so they can't tell that your student is going to be that 1/3. But what they can do is look at the past, and they can look at the test scores and compare them 5, 10, 15 years ago to see if those students came to the school and got involved and filled up the stadiums and got involved in the clubs, and then ultimately came back to support the school. So what is the truth, though, about these college entrance exams going away? We know that during the pandemic and afterward, there was a mass exodus from colleges who could not get the SATs or ACTs because they were canceled. But what happened was that lasted for a couple years, 2 years to 3 years, depending on the school. But then what happened was colleges start to realize that it wasn't working. And MIT was the first college in 2021 to return back to testing. They said the students that we're trying to help were actually hurting, especially those in the disadvantaged or lower socioeconomic areas, because those schools don't tend to have any IB classes or AP courses, but they can all take the same test that everyone else takes no matter where they are, so it does level the playing field, because they know that the GPA isn't necessarily what the colleges are going to look at, because it could vary depending on what school and where you live at. So MIT and then Purdue followed, and what we started to see is gradually schools started returning back to testing. And just less than a year ago, we saw all the Ivy Leagues, starting with Dartmouth and Yale and Harvard and Brown and UT Austin. And now pretty much all schools have returned back to testing. So when you hear someone who says, just go to a test optional school, unless they're willing to pay for your child's college if they're wrong, do not trust them. Do not trust people who are not in this business every single day and who knows what's going on. And in all reality, test optional really became this lie, very deceptive to families, because colleges are a business, and it was really just benefiting them because they could increase their applications, which meant more students would apply, which means they could reject more students, which means they became a better brand. And when they became a better brand, they became more selective. And many colleges, charge up to $100 per application fee. So if you increase your applications by thousands, you could pretty much make several $1,000,000 just off application fees. So it definitely benefits them. And if a college does keep that tier of second tier policy of having that optional test option, then they're going to require higher GPAs of the student, a more stellar resume, a better application, a better essay, which those become very biased because those can be paid for by people who have a lot of money. And so it doesn't make fair, and they only can allow a certain amount of students in under test optional. When so many colleges were continuing on with the program after the 2020 lockdowns, it overwhelmed the admissions officers, and many of them quit because they had no fair way to compare students. And they found that there was only a 1% diversity gain when it came to trying to help the students that needed it. And students got this false sense of hope, well, I don't have to take a test. And they went in and realized that they probably would not get in, and if they did get in, they probably wouldn't get any scholarship money. But a student who takes a test over someone who does not has a 250% or a 2.5 times more chance of getting in and getting money over someone who does not. So why do even smart students bomb these type of tests, these SATs and ACTs? This is very typical. I have heard this story hundreds and hundreds of times over. And I teach at public, private, parochial, and charter schools and many homeschoolers. And I hear this, that students who are really good students do not get a very good score to reflect their GPA. That is because these tests are not about IQ, intelligence, or curriculum, or what school your child goes to. That's why valedictorians or the top 10% are often in my classes when I teach at these schools. These tests are about logic and critical thinking. How well you can answer questions under pressure in a short amount of time. It's the one thing we all have in common, because what we learn here in Texas is not what someone might learn in another state. Every school has different curriculum. Every homeschool has a different curriculum. Every state. And so it cannot be about content, but something that any student can do well in. And the way the questions are written, they're written to purposely mislead a student, where the wrong answers can be very tricky and very appealing. And so it's often picked by students because they don't understand how to take a test. They think it's about how they take a test at school. But these tests are objective. There's only one right answer. And it's a standardized test, which means it has standardized questions and standardized answers. And that's why you don't study for these tests, but you study the tests themselves. You study the patterns. And you learn how to look at them very logically and very carefully with a critical eye. It's a totally different skill set, test taking in itself. Most schools do not teach test taking skills. Most homes do not. And your kids will be tested all their life, no matter what they do after high school. If they go to college, if they go into the military, if they go into the trades, there's going to be some sort of testing. At their job, they may be tested on certifications. And so this is why it's important that as parents that we teach our kids this skill set. It's not like learning math and English. It's completely different. We're almost doing a disservice to our kids because knowing that they're going to be tested somewhere in their life by not incorporating test prep into their life. And you can even make it an elective on your transcript. This is especially true for homeschoolers, but many schools I teach at will actually do that for the student. So why is College Prep Genius different than most test prep companies out there, even some of the most expensive ones? Well, it is because we try to be very ethical in what we do. A lot of companies will give their students a very hard diagnostic test that they made up, and students will not do very well and get a terrible score. And then once you go through their program, which could be very, very expensive, they'll give them a completely different test in the end that's very easy, and it might reflect that they went up a couple hundred points. In reality, they did not, because these were not equal tests, and it was a deceptive result. So when the student goes and takes the actual test and doesn't get a great score, they often will blame themselves for not studying enough, or the company might blame the student, or the parent might blame the student for not studying. So, but in reality, they were deceived. And a lot of companies will also teach students a lot of content, a lot of busy work, more math concepts, thousands of vocabulary words, lots of grammar rules. Again, these are not content-based tests. You don't study a bunch of words and a bunch of math. You study the logical patterns. And a lot of companies will have very deceptive testimonials. They will often buy the test scores of sophomores who took the PSAT and in certain zip codes, and they'll find the students that have already scored very high, and they will offer them free classes so that when that student scores high, let's say for example on the junior PSAT, who probably would have done well already, then they will take the credit for it. My thought is, if you're that great of a company, then why don't you find the kids with the lowest scores and give them free classes? And a lot of companies, very expensive ones, get into a lot of schools because they give the school, the PTA, the football team, they'll give them kickbacks for getting their kids in there. So a lot of deception going on, so you've got to be really careful. And you always want to look at the reputation of the company. We always tell people to read independent reviews about us, not just what we say, but search us, because we've been around for 20 years. So why should my middle school student take a test prep class? We teach 6th grade and above, and some of our 7th graders score higher than seniors, and they haven't even been to high school yet. Starting early puts time on your side. You cannot get time back. Any athlete that's talented, that goes on to go play college ball or whatever sport it is, or even into professional sports, someone who didn't start in the junior or senior year of high school. They have been working on that sport for many years. Same thing with perfecting your instrument, piano or guitar or whatever it is. Students or dance or art, they've been working on it for a long time. This is not instant success. You cannot shortcut the shortcut. It takes time to learn the patterns and to apply them appropriately. So there is no instant success. Accuracy before speed. You get good, then you get fast. And the more you practice, the more you start to solidify the information so that you can apply it appropriately, and you can internalize it so that it becomes second nature to you, and you gain that mastery. And as students get older, they are going to get busier. It's why younger students can learn this early, do it in a slower time frame, and then it becomes just a part of them when they're in high school. And if they get to high school and they get the test score they want early in high school, then they're done. They can just relax, and everything else from there is all downhill. Just get it done early. It's so important. Not only will it lessen test anxiety for your student, but it will help them gain that test maturity. Will colleges look down on my student taking the test early or taking it many times? Absolutely not. Your younger students can take the test because of what's known as score choice. That means your student, even in middle school who takes a test, never, even in high school, never has to turn the scores in until they're ready. There's no pressure to take the test. And most colleges will super score. That means they'll take the highest scores from different tests. So if you get a really good math score on one test and a better reading on another, then they'll cherry pick them to give them the overall composite score, which usually will give them more money. Students can stay focused and mature when they start early. 85% of colleges look at this as a metric and what they use because it makes them look good. And the test scores are the most important metric that your students can do that can change everything. And what a lot of people don't know is what's called legislatively imposed college metrics. And what that is specifically imposed metrics for admission. They're looking for certain class ranks, test scores, GPA, to basically have that automatic admission to their college. And so what happens is, if they have to have high scores and they have a certain amount of low scores that they cut off at the top 10%. And this is all by law. This is based on a lot of colleges that have those land grants, and some students who meet the minimum scores, then they can be on the lower cutoff score. But what happens is this admitting a low cutoff student impacts their Department of Education. So a profile based on metrics of median test scores and GPA. So they have to do something about this. So they need to attract higher scoring students with scholarships. They're actually paying for the test score to help the profile at the Department of Education, to give them lots of money. They're not necessarily paying your child's way because of your child. They're paying for their test scores. So ultimately, you'll get lots of scholarship money, and the test score becomes the highest level of currency for both admission and money. So don't be the average family. How do you know where you're at right now? A lot of families, and I've heard this so many times, they're thinking, well, I've got a pretty smart student. He or she's fine. They'll be fine. We don't need to worry about that. But as I said earlier, this is a different skill set. It's why you see so many smart kids who have high GPAs and honors classes and AP courses bomb these tests, because it's not like taking a normal test, and most students are going to fall for the trick answers. So don't be the average family that just waits and comes to us at the last minute, and they're scrambling and they're stressed because they've done nothing to prepare, and they have to end up settling or not getting in, or definitely not getting any scholarship money. So what you could do to figure out where you're at, what you need to know right now, is have your student do a baseline test. They can take an actual College Board free SAT. Go to collegeprepgenius.com/SAT1. It's a real test. It's not made up, and it has how to score it. And have your student take that test. They don't have to know the score. It's just simply a baseline for them. Now you know their starting point. And again, you may be very surprised of the score. And then go to a site like Appley or ThoughtCo. There's other ones on there where you can enter your student's stats. So whatever their GPA is and what their baseline test score is, you want to have that. Then choose a few colleges, maybe some colleges your child's thinking about, or some popular colleges, and then put the stats in the profile. And what's going to happen, it tends to create a graph, and it's going to show you how many students were accepted or denied with those same stats. Now that gives you a great starting point to say, okay, here's where we're at. We know that, a high percentage of students with these same stats were denied. So that allows you to make a game plan. You can think, well, we can either choose another college or work on raising our test scores and our GPAs. Whoops. All right, so let me give you an example. All right, so I just pulled a few colleges out. For example, Texas A&M. This is from ThoughtCo. You'll notice over here on the far right, the 25th percentile is 1160. So if you come over here to the graph, let's say your student has 1160, you can see that the red are denied and the yellow are waitlisted. So you've got well over 50% of students who fell into that category. If you look at their 75th percentile, then you can see that there was very little rejection and very little waitlisted. Most students were accepted or accepted and didn't attend. The University of Florida, the 25th percentile is 1200, and so that puts you over here with, again, a lot has to do with GPA, but almost half of them were rejected or denied, and the 75th percentile was 1340. And I noticed that there's still a good amount of students, probably less, maybe more like 40% were rejected. But look over here, if you go above the 1340, you can see that hardly any students were denied or even waitlisted. So again, you even get a higher score can make a huge difference. And the military schools can all be free. I've had a lot of kids who've got over $400,000 worth of scholarships to, whether it was West Point or the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy. Again, you have to meet the minimum SAT or ACT to even be considered. And so let's just look at the U.S. Naval Academy, for example. The 25th percentile on their SATs is 1250. And lots of rejections there. You can see that. And the 75th percentile is 1520. And so, you have not as many rejections. You have more people that were accepted. So this gives you an idea. So you can do that on your own to see where you're at. What if my child doesn't want to go to college? We hear this a lot. My child has no plans of going to college and they just want to get out of high school. Well, oftentimes teenagers change their mind, and the hardest thing is to get to, let's say, the senior year, and you have a child who's been pretty adamant about not going, and all of a sudden they come to you and say, I've decided to become an engineer or some other profession that requires a degree. So now you're really stressed and stuck, because what do you do now? Because maybe you don't have enough credits, or you haven't really prepared them. Or what if your child gets out of high school a couple of years and then decides to go back to college? Well, they probably forgot some basic algebra and some basic geometry. It's better that your child takes the SAT or ACT. And by the way, every college will take SAT or ACT. It does not matter. 100% will take either one. If they prefer one over the other, they'll convert the score. But the College Board and the ACT company will archive your scores indefinitely. So most colleges will take old SAT scores, and so you have your score waiting for you, even if you get out and change your mind. It's better to prepare and give your child that opportunity. If your child goes into the trades, they also are going to need to know how to take tests for certifications. Learning standardized tests can be life-changing no matter what your child's going to end up doing after high school. And over the years, we've had lots of families tell us that the strategies that we teach at College Prep Genius, they use them on so many other tests, because a standardized test has standardized questions and standardized answers, and they all do the same thing. They have one objective answer and several distractors. And so you'll notice over here a lot of these tests we know nothing about, but they're written very similar in the way they compose their questions and answers. For example, the Professional Performance Security Test, a gentleman in Arizona came over to us and told us that his company had given the entire employee pool the Professional Performance Security Test, And he had been watching the videos with his daughter, our program, and the entire company failed but him. Now, again, what is that about? I don't know, but I do understand standardized tests. And you can watch many, many videos on our website. That we had a young lady who came up to us in Dallas and said that she had taken Mandarin 1 and she wanted to test into Mandarin 2. And when she did not know most of the words. So she just used College Prep Genius strategies and tested out as a native Mandarin speaker. So again, you're going to see these on these videos on our website. We've had students get full rides to law school and med school, all because of understanding test-taking skills. Even if at your job someday, if you want to apply for Hobby Lobby, you've got to take a test, and it's a logic test like the SAT. So what are the steps to college prep success for each grade? Well, some of the things that you can be doing that are really going to help your student down the road, and that is get really involved in some great prestigious awards that your student can participate in that will help them to stand out. Most schools will not tell you about these, and maybe other parents won't either, but we will. We want your kids to be successful. So here's some awards to start looking into, and this is kind of a timeline for you to look at to see what I should be doing in each grade. I want to show you a tale of two families. We've got your Wise family and your Wait family. And unfortunately, most people fall under Wait family. That means when their kids are in the 6th and 7th grade, they're just thinking, there's no way I'm going to think about test prep. Whereas you could actually be looking into what's called talent searches. For example, Johns Hopkins, Northwestern, Rocky Mountain, Stanford. This is where students can qualify for a talent search, which means they can do that through their Iowa, the Stanford. The parents can nominate them. But you will take an SAT or ACT, and your score does not have to be very high, in the 400s, very low, for math or reading. And then they can get a big award ceremony, their name in the paper. They can be state recognized and start getting scholarship offers even in 7th grade. And this puts them on the radar of colleges. Colleges see that your child was focused and mature at a young age, and that's the kind of student that they want to come to their school because they know they're probably going to be very successful, and they're willing to pay their way in many, many cases. So you definitely want to be doing that. And then when your student gets into that 8th grade, go ahead and take the PSAT 8-9 and the CLT 8. Neither count for scholarships, neither count for pressure. They are just to see where your child is at. Again, most 8th graders are not thinking about that. They're thinking they have lots of time. Now all of a sudden high school happens and students get busy. So taking the PSAT 8-9, again, just simply for practice, and the CLT 10, and maybe 1 or 2 SATs, not necessarily both. Again, you're gaining that test maturity. And again, the Wait family is still thinking about it, knowing that they need to do something, but not quite sure that this is the right time. And then the 10th grade year. This is kind of the year that can be life-changing. Taking the PSAT 10, again, it doesn't count, but the CLT 10 is offered up to 5 times a year, and your student can take up to all 5, and they'll take the highest scores, and they can receive scholarship money in 10th grade before they even become a junior. And we're the official test prep for the CLT, so we have a CLT program. And then maybe take a couple SATs or ACTs as well. Now, your students' heaviest studying should be the summer before the junior year. That's when they should treat the PSAT, which is a money magnet. We threw away 7 trash bags of college offers that included full rides and room and board and grad school and computers and spending cash and study abroad stipends and so forth. So that summer, they could be really working on that PSAT. And then in August, take the August SAT and the October SAT. Both are going to be right before the PSAT. And then as a junior, take that National Merit PSAT/NMSQT. It is held in October. So you contact your school to find out when it's going to be offered. And then if you're going to one of the schools that the CLT is in, take a CLT as well. And then in 12th grade, again, if you haven't done this, again, continue on taking as many SATs as you can until you get the score that you want. There are colleges that will let your student take the test up until the day before he or she starts college. What does this equal? It equals admissions, admissions to even some of the top tier schools, service academies, big scholarship money, 100,000, 200,000. Many full rides could be available to your student. The Wade family, unfortunately, the average one comes to us at the end of the 11th grade year who are really stressed out because they've done nothing and now they're scrambling and their kids are very busy with so much going on, and there's panic. And they ultimately just get some low scores and may or may not be able to get in, and may, good chance, not even get any scholarship money, and then end up with a lot of debt that will cripple them for many years. So don't let that be you. We see this all the time. Or we'll have families say, you know, I heard you speak 3 years ago, and but I didn't do anything, and now we are stressed. So what I've seen over the years is the reality of the merry-go-round endless cycle. And a lot of schools, the guidance counselors who are very overwhelmed, and their job isn't so much to get your child into college, it's to get them out of high school. And so they often will tell the students to wait until the junior year to start thinking about SATs. At that point, you know, then you'll have all the math you need. But that would be true if it were a content test, but it's not. So we have 124 waking hours in a week, or 16 hours daily. So if your student goes to a public or private school, they probably spend about 40 hours at school. Maybe they have about 10 hours of homework. Possibly they have a part-time job. They probably either play sports or go watch sports at their school. Maybe they have extra clubs, curricular, church, activities, volunteering and so forth. And none of this even counts the driving time back and forth, or any extra things going on at school, or your friends, or your phones, or your games, or anything else that your child does. And you can see how many hours are consumed by your average teenager. And of course, with very limited time left over. So they are already maxed out. And so what generally tends to happen is the students who wait end up getting the average test score, a 21 ACT or a 1030 SAT, which means they probably don't get into their college, or possibly they don't get any money and spend 20 years paying off some type of loan, federal or private loan. So it's just this endless cycle, this merry-go-round that just keeps going and going and going. But the test scores are the golden ticket to free college. Some families will say, I didn't know this. And that's why I'm here to show you and tell you. I've done this for 20 years, and I've taught tens of thousands of students on how to do this. So the question would be, well, then what is a good SAT or ACT score? Well, it's the one that gets you what you want. It's the one that gets you into the school, and it's one that gets you the money and hopefully get it paid for. The dream college is the one you don't have to pay for. And so here's kind of an overall look at the three main tests, SAT, ACT, and CLT. And you'll see why most students don't get the best scores, because the questions are probably an average of about a minute per question. You'll notice on the far right in red, you've got anywhere from 42 to 60, 71 to 52, 60 seconds per question. None of that counts even any reading of passages or any transcribing of answers. And so these tests are designed for carelessness. So students are going to rush and try to get through the questions because of the time frame. Unfortunately, that's going to cause a lot of mistakes. Now, the good news is all the questions can be answered in 30 seconds or less, which is what we teach the students. And so you might be thinking, well, I have a child who's a good test taker, or I have a child that thinks they're a bad test taker. So what's the difference? And how do we help both of them? Well, your students who consider themselves a good test taker tend to be very logically minded naturally. It's very intuitive for them to see patterns naturally. And for those students, they don't know everything, so a few more strategies can really put them over the top. So those students, you want to start them early, and preferably middle school if possible, because it helps them to gain that test maturity. Or you might have the other student who is the rule follower, the student who stresses and second guesses themselves and overthinks everything, and they spend lots of times working out the problems a long way. Well, the good news is that logic is not a personality trait. It's a trained skill. Anybody can be a better logical thinker. So for these students, starting them early is going to help them to not only train their brain, but also to be more logical, but also it's going to lessen that test anxiety. So I want to show you some strategies that we'll be teaching in our program. Hopefully you will take our class and you'll learn this information just as a small snippet of what we'll be doing. So I'm going to show you some proven test taking strategies that actually apply to several different tests. And I'm going to show you an example in what's known as the writing language on the SAT, the English section on the ACT, and the grammar section on the CLT. Now you'll notice this is a long passage, and the question asks which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English. At the bottom, I cite the source of where I found this question from. It's not something I made up. And what happens generally is most students will read this passage, they'll read the answer choices, and then think, and then they'll go back and maybe read it 2 or 3 times to try to figure out what they're looking for. Okay, but I'm going to show you the pattern in this particular type of question. You'll notice the answer choices, the words are the same, but the punctuation is different. So in that case, instead of reading linear, you're going to scan this vertically. So notice after the word nickname, 3 have a comma and 1 does not. After the word however, 2 have a comma and 2 do not. So the answer that contains the most in common with the other answer choices is the correct answer. Now this pattern is because the test makers like to take the correct answer and take variations of it to create the wrong answers. But as your students learn these strategies and patterns and techniques, they can use this to their advantage. Now let me show you this using a question from an ACT. Again, you have 5 passages to read plus answer in about 40 seconds or so. Again, same words, different punctuation. So we're going to scan vertically. We notice that 2 have a comma after the word began and 2 have a comma after the word out, and the answer that contains the most in common with the other answers is G. And here's again a similar type of question on the CLT, the classic learning test. We're going to scan it vertically and see a comma after the word bigger, a comma after the word better on these 2, and so B is our correct answer. And I cited the answers sources at the bottom. Now that's a little snippet from the English writing grammar part of these type of tests. Now I want to show you some strategies from the digital SAT reading portion. Before 2024, SAT, ACT, and CLT were extremely similar. The SAT changed in 2024, and the ACT will have their final test out in September of 2025. And so let me show you an example just taken from the SAT. So there are 5 types of SAT passages. There are 54 total passages, and they fall under 5 categories: passage with a blank, passage with an underlined function, passage with a chart, general passage, and the dual passage text. And they're going to end up being 14 subcategories of questions. So I'm going to show you a snippet from our program, but there's so much more. For example, this question here, again, this is called passage with a blank, precise word or phrase. So again, most students will read the passage and the question and answer several times and spend 2 or 3 minutes on it, and you only have about a minute, and they're just burning up the clock. But the key and the pattern to this particular subcategory is you find the blank, you find the punctuation mark closest to the blank, and then you highlight the information following that punctuation. And in this case, it says over 90% of Cherokee people could read and write it. And so you skim the answer choices and look for an answer that restates something about 90% of people doing something. And we notice our answers is A. Now, widespread. You'll notice that we didn't read hardly any of the passage, because if we did, we would be confused of what the possible answer could be, because they're written to mislead the students. Now let's go over some math. A lot of students who are good in math tend to get terrible math scores because they spend several minutes working the problem out the long way, showing all their work. When you have a little over a minute, you can't spend 3 or 4 minutes on a problem, or you'll not be able to finish on time and not get the best score. So for example, what is the product of these two numbers? Well, simply look at the last 2 digits, 2 and 3. 2 times 3 is 6. Your answer will end in 6. C is the correct answer. No calculations, no mistakes. It's a strategy that we teach our students to always look at the last digits, whether it's adding or multiplying or subtracting or properties or factors. Just train your brain to do that. Now, this question takes about 4 minutes to work out. In the figure below, a square is inscribed in a circle with diameter S. What is the sum of the area of shaded regions in terms of S? You know, a student might normally think about the Pythagorean theorem and length times height and pi r squared and all of that. But again, you've got so little time. So here's the pattern on this particular question. Notice they all have an S square. They all have a minus sign. 2 have 1/2 and 2 have pi over 4. So again, using our cloning strategy, C has the most in common with all the other answer choices. So this can be a huge benefit for your students. This along with all the other strategies that we teach. So test prep is an investment. You pay now or you pay later exponentially. We are very blessed to have been awarded 30 unsolicited awards. Kathy Duffy, on her website, she reviews curriculum. She has a full review about our program, so you can go read more. And she's very famous. She does a lot of review of so many curriculums and so many programs. We are the official test prep for a lot of companies that you are probably well aware of, whether it's Veritas Press, HSLDA Academy, the CLT test, which I love the CLT. We are their official test prep, and we have a creative program for them. Christian Academy America, Classical Conversations, True North, and more. Heidi St. John uses our program. We've been reviewed by the Old Schoolhouse magazine, and we have many, many, many video testimonials on our website at collegeprepgenius.com/testimonials, and many, many more on YouTube. So you probably received this video from someone who's possibly hosting a class in their city, and if they did, you may have some questions. So I want to show you the most common questions that people tend to ask someone who wants to host my class. The first one is, one of the comments that my hosts often get is, well, let me know the next time you're going to host. I'll probably wait a year and then my student will attend. Well, the reality is that the person who's hosting my class will probably only do it one time. Usually once their child has gone through our program and got their scholarships, there's really no need to host the class again. On occasion, we do have some hosts that actually do it every year because it's a ministry to them and they love helping students. But the majority will probably only do it one time. So you will miss your opportunity more than likely if you don't take advantage of it. And don't let a year go by when your student could have been learning this stuff and lessening that anxiety, taking that pressure off them. How will a student remember everything they learned in the class? Well, they're going to walk away very excited from the live in-person class, very confident, very motivated, very excited and glad that they came. But they'll probably retain about 10% of what they heard the first time. So we give all the students as a bonus my self-paced course, so they can go back over and hear the information again. They can self-correct their mistakes. They have homework that reinforces what they learned, journal for success, real practice tests, and so much more. And they get a whole year's access to that self-paced course. Well, the cost seems high to me. Well, we are not that high, believe me. Under $500, A lot of families spend more than that on just uniforms and dance or sports stuff. We keep our prices low. We don't ask anybody to pay our way. We have a minimum of students. We pay our own airfare and hotel and rent a car and food. And so the price is something that's very reasonable. And so something other, if you've never priced a test prep company where they're in the upper hundreds to thousands, I've seen them in $10,000, $15,000. And they don't have the best track record of score raise. So you've got to look at basically the return on investment. What does that mean? Well, an average state school is $120,000. The average cost of a private school is $240,000, and the average cost of a top tier elite school is $360,000. And they can definitely all go higher, but that's just an average. And so putting in a little bit of money for your student to be able to get in and hopefully get it paid for is a very small investment. Are there any refunds? On the in-person classes, there are no refunds because we have the host needs a minimum and we book our flights and all of that. Unless the class is ever canceled. If the class is canceled for lack of students, then certainly. But if the class is going on, there are no refunds. Will the class ever be canceled? Yes. If the host doesn't meet the minimum amount of students by the deadline, which is usually about a month before the class, then yes, the class will be canceled and we will return all money. It's never happened as far as just canceling for no reason. We've never done that. We canceled only one time because there was a hurricane and we rescheduled for the next week. Otherwise, the class will go on, and we want your kids to be there. We don't want them to have any excuses to not to come. Which should my child take, the SAT, ACT, or CLT? This is a really good question because a lot has to do with where your child's going to go to college. I love the CLT, but as of now, they're only in about 300 colleges, but they're growing rapidly. And you can go to their website, cltexam.com. You can find us on their website, but also the fact that they are growing and it's a better test. It's based on Western traditions. And if the school your child wants to go to, then absolutely look into the CLT. We have a CLT program as well because they gave us a CLT test. We're the only company that has an actual test that we created a program from. SAT and ACT are accepted in every single college. So that is for you to look into for your student. Will my ESA, EMA charter school pay for the class? Yes, in many states we are an approved vendor. And so if you have that in your state for your family and you get funding, check to see if we're an approved vendor. If we're not, let us know and we can check into becoming one, or maybe you may have to nominate us, but we'd love to be able to serve your families in those programs. Is there a sibling discount? Yes, and that will reflect when you register online or through your host. Can parents sit in on the class? Absolutely. I love it when parents are in there. They're able to see what we do. They get just as excited, and they're able to know how to help their own students. So sitting in on a class is totally fine. If you have a paid student, you can sit in. Just sit in the back, be quiet, no chit-chatting, and hold your questions until the end. But it's totally acceptable as long as there's room and it's okay with the host. How soon should I register for the class? A lot of people are waiting to see if something better comes along, but the class could be canceled. If your host has a deadline, that is because we are looking to book our flights and all. And so don't delay on registering. Again, if the class doesn't make, then you'll get a refund. So go ahead and register as soon as you can so the host can know if they can meet their minimum students. What should we do before the class? I highly recommend taking that baseline score. If you don't have a starting point, you're not going to know if your child has improved or not. So go to the collegeprepgenius.com/SET1. That's an actual test that your student can take. There's no pressure. Just time it accordingly. And then you can not share the score with them if you don't want to. But then later on, once they go through our program and do the follow-up with the homework through the self-pace, then they'll retake the same test again, and that's when we see our students going up 200 or 300 points the first time through. A lot of them have gone up more and some have gone up less, but every time you go back and hear it again and again, you'll pick up something you missed the first time. So the in-person class that the host has sent to you, information, it's generally going to be a 2-day boot camp. Myself or one of my teachers will be there to teach your kids. Right now we're doing SAT or CLT classes. We will not analyze the ACT until they finalize their last test, which won't be until fall of 2025. And you'll get that bonus e-course, which has the journal and the homework and the practice test, the quizzes, and they'll get that 1-year access and some more information as well. So to find out about our class, the person who sent you the video, contact that host and let them know that you're interested in the class, or if you want more information. If you're not sure how you got this video and you're interested in taking the class, then contact us and we'll let you know. You let us know where you live, what city and what state you're in, and we can find the host that probably sent it to you. College Prep Genius, you can look for us at info@collegeprepgenius.com. You can call our office at 817-282-7737. And hopefully we'll see you at one of the upcoming classes. We have classes all over the United States, and we'd love to be able to help your students reach test success. So thank you so much for listening, and go back and listen to this again, because there's so much to it to help you, and feel free to pass it along to others who are needing to get free college and not spend years with college debt for their kids. So thank you so much.